All right, today we're going to crack open a pretty incredible text from the 14th century, but you'll be amazed at how modern it feels. It's basically a guide on how to direct our spiritual energy, to find some real focus and maybe avoid that feeling of burnout. Let's just dive right in. So let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like you're just spinning your wheels? Like you're putting in all this effort in your work, in your personal growth, in your spiritual life, but you're just not getting anywhere? You feel busy, right? Maybe even totally exhausted, but that true progress, it just feels out of reach. It's such a common feeling, this sense of being stuck, like your energy is just completely misdirected. Well, it turns out there's a timeless strategy for this, and it comes from a pretty incredible source, St. Catherine of Siena. In a series of, ecstatic dialogues, she dictated something called the Treatise of Discretion, and it's this amazing guide that basically teaches us that real achievement isn't about more effort. It's about smarter, more focused internal awareness. So let's get right into the first key idea, which is this concept she calls the forgotten virtue. This is the foundation for everything else, and it's simply called discretion. Okay, so according to this treatise, discretion is this deep, true knowledge you have of yourself and your relationship with God or a higher power. It's not just some abstract idea. It's the very lens through which you see the world. It's the compass that directs every single one of your spiritual efforts. It's really the foundation of a meaningful life. So if discretion is that important, where does it even come from? Well, the text lays out a really clear path for how to cultivate it. And in doing so, it also shows us what its exact opposite is. The treatise presents this really beautiful lineage of virtue. The argument is that you can't have one without the one that comes before it. It all kicks off with self-knowledge. When you truly know yourself, your strengths and your flaws, that awareness naturally leads to humility. And it's from that humble place that discretion is born. The text even poetically calls it the only child of self-knowledge, which then marries love, and together they give birth to all the other virtues. And then, on the flip side, you see the other path. The opposite of discretion is indiscretion, and its root isn't humility at all, it's pride. The text warns that a person who is indiscreet often falls into what's called vainglory, taking credit for things that aren't theirs, which just ultimately leads to scandal and spiritual dead ends. So the choice is pretty stark, a foundation of humility or one of pride. Now, this brings us to a really central conflict that the treatise just tackles head-on. What's the right balance between our internal state, what we feel inside, and our external actions, the things we actually do? So here's the crucial point, this distinction between the goal and the tool. So many of us think spiritual practice is all about the external stuff, fasting, long hours of meditation, really strict disciplines. But Catherine is crystal clear. Those are just tools. They are the means to an end. The actual goal is the internal transformation, cultivating an affection of love and slaying our own selfish will. And here's the real danger of getting that backwards. The text warns that if you place all your focus on these external, finite works, you'll be left with absolutely nothing when you're forced to stop, whether that's because of illness or age or just circumstance. The true merit, the lasting value, is found only in the virtue of love, which is infinite and totally internal. Okay, so this is all really fascinating philosophy, but how does this actually apply to our day-to-day lives, right? Well, the treatise builds this out into a very practical framework. Discretion directs us to fulfill these three key responsibilities, or dues as they're called. First, to God, we give glory and thanks for our gifts. Second, to ourselves, we practice humility by acknowledging our own limits and our faults. And third, to our neighbor, we owe a debt of love, humble prayer, and the example of an honorable life. Now, that might sound like a call for just boundless, unconditional love for absolutely everyone, all the time, but the treatise adds a really crucial and, a very discreet limitation. And here it is, the catch. Your charity towards other people cannot come at the expense of your own spiritual integrity. Holy discretion says that you must not commit even a small sin to help someone else, even if it feels like doing so would save the whole world. That's a pretty radical form of spiritual self-care and boundary setting. In today's terms, that could mean not lying to cover for a coworker's mistake. The principle is that charity has to be concerned with yourself first, meaning maintaining your own integrity so that you can then be of genuine use to others. It's not selfish, it's strategic. So in this way, discretion also acts as this powerful form of protection. It's like spiritual armor.
It's a prudence that keeps you from being fooled or manipulated, and it's a fortitude that gives you the strength to stand firm, even when things get really difficult.
So, this path of self-knowledge and careful action, it sounds challenging, for sure. To make it all a bit less abstract, the text doesn't just give us rules. It gives us role models, people who have actually walked this path successfully. We see it first in Catherine herself, who had this deep compassion that literally influenced popes and princes. We see it in big names like Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, who are described as these shining lights that drew people out of darkness. And, maybe most relatably, we see it in the journey of the Apostle Peter. Peter's journey is so powerful because it shows this isn't about being perfect from the get-go. He started with what the text calls imperfect love. He loved the good times, sure, but he failed under pressure, even denying Christ. After that failure came this period of fear and deep regret. But through perseverance and prayer, he ultimately achieved true perfection. His story just goes to show that growth is a process. And that ultimately is the whole function of discretion. It takes that initial, exciting spark of devotion and it transforms it into a steady, mature, lasting flame. It's described as the light that gives flavor to every instrument of virtue, which just means it makes every single action meaningful and sustainable. So with all this in mind, the treatise leaves us with one final, really profound application of discretion. It asks us to think about how we should look at the faults we see in other people. Instead of judging someone for their mistakes, a discreet person practices what's called holy compassion. They look at that person and they think this: today it is your turn and tomorrow it will be mine. It's just this powerful recognition of our shared human frailty. It replaces judgment with humility, and it reminds us that true wisdom isn't about pointing out other people's faults, but in recognizing the grace that keeps us from falling ourselves. And that is a thought worth carrying with you.